Hey everyone, this is going to be a more off-the-cuff video today. First of all, I did want to thank everyone again who's been liking and engaging with my content. My channel has really grown in the last couple of weeks, and I really appreciate all the new subscribers and all the engagement and all that. This video was actually inspired by one of those pieces of engagement, namely a question or a series of questions that I got over on my blog, and that I thought were so interesting that they deserve to be sort of elaborated upon like this rather than me just responding to them in writing like I more often tend to do. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in this video while in the background you get to enjoy watching me play Three Hopes. I am by no means an expert at this game, but since I am already several playthroughs in, you may be entertained by the weird classes I have different characters in, just because that's what I've been working on at that particular time. But let's get into those questions. I'm going to go ahead and put them up on screen so you can see them as I read them aloud. Based on your frequent discussions, it seems like you don't care much about either Claude or Edelgard as characters. What would it have taken for you to find them as compelling as Dimitri, or compelling for other reasons? How would you change or improve Claude, and it's supposed to be Edelgard there, so that you would have been invested in them like you are with Dimitri? Perhaps regarding the Golden Deer and Black Eagles, too. How would you make their team dynamics as compelling as the Blue Lions were for you? I thought about this for quite a while before I decided to make it into a video, because there's a number of interesting angles I could pursue here. Probably the first one that came to my mind was that the preference for one character or one house over the others is by design. That's one of the main draws of faction-based gameplay or stories with these different easily branded, easily recognizable groups that are fighting each other in a sort of rivalry. Think Harry Potter Hogwarts houses. I mean, I realize that's like 10 to 15 years out of date as far as what was what's a mega fandom now, but I guess Intelligent Systems thought better late than never. On that note, there's always, I think most people are going to favor one over the others, or conversely have one that they dislike more than the other two. And I freely admit that I have always preferred Dimitri, even back during Three Houses pre-release, and I'm also willing to admit that it was from the beginning for fairly shallow reasons. My favorite color is blue, my favorite Fire Emblem physical weapon type is lances, stuff like that. And then as we started getting more information coming in, as I actually played Three Houses back in 2019, I mostly stuck onto that one because Dimitri is just so damn wonderfully, beautifully gay, or not explicit avatar gay. I guess I have to make that qualification, but you guys, if you've listened to me at all, I'm talking about subtext here. But there's a lot of it. I am confident when I say that Dimitri has effectively replaced Ike as the male Fire Emblem Lord, non-Avatar Lord, with the most queer subtext, and I'm very happy for him because I've had issues with Ike for years that I generally don't have with Dimitri, but I get to enjoy that sort of content with him, and I'm perfectly fine with that. I'm fine with saying that is the main draw for me for Dimitri and the Lions. There's also that it's the most traditional, I guess I should say Azure Gleam too, but they are now the most traditional Fire Emblem stories. They have the most traditional Fire Emblem setup, so they're more recognizable, and the plotting tends to be a little more consistent because it is formulaic compared to most of the other routes we're discussing here. So that's why I favor Dimitri over the other two. It's not for any drawn-out political or moral reasons, which I have seen a lot of that. I'm exhausted by it because I've been listening to it for 3 years, and it's happening again in the comments of my videos. I really just do not care about that angle. I am exhausted by it, and I'm fully aware that Intelligent Systems doesn't care about it either. As long as you give them your money and you wail on units and heroes, they don't care what you think about these games. And you can tell in the way the developers talk about that that's not really a concern. They describe Three Hopes as a turf war. They really don't care about making a political statement here. So, that's not why I like Dimitri more. But I realize that for various reasons connected with how social media works, people feel more compelled to tie their interest in fiction and media to like who they are as a person morally and politically. So there's more of that compulsion to justify why you like or dislike certain characters or stories or whatever based on that. And I've never really enjoyed doing that. I've always thought it was kind of pointless and performative. And if I may say so, part of my online brand is that I am utterly shameless. So I feel confident in reinforcing that here in case you didn't know that about me. So that's the why of why I prefer Dimitri. And I will say, going back to the questions, I don't necessarily prefer the Lions as a collective more than the other two groups. There are dynamics in the other houses, namely Hubert and Ferdinand, Dorothea. Marianne's got some nice moments. I think Hilda has some good moments. So there are those dynamics and characters that I like from the other houses. And conversely, there are characters in the Blue Lions that I'm just not as personally interested in. Like, I'm not really interested in Annette and her daddy issues, and I think Mercedes's relationship with her serial killer brother is just very strange and very oddly handled by the writing. Also, Felix, obviously I enjoy Felix on the conceptual level, like what he means to Dimitri and their intimacy and their relationship, but I never really been attached to, like, Navarre archetypes, the angsty swordsman. They've never really done much for me. So Felix is an example of a character I enjoy more in concept than in practice, if that makes sense. But regardless of that, I would say that while I can't really then do that for, say that how would I like each of the house dynamics equally, because I kind of do already, I guess. I mean, I guess I like the deer a little less because there's less in the deer that really invests me personally. But we can tackle these questions from the perspective of the house leaders, because I do have more opinions on those, even if I'm generally indifferent to a lot of what goes on with them, and a lot of my negative perceptions of Claude and especially Edelgard come from, not from the characters themselves, but from how certain members of their fans, not all of them, if you're listening, I'm not accusing all Claude and Edelgard fans of doing this, I'm just saying that I've seen some bad things in the 3 years since Three Houses came out, and that does kind of sour you on characters that otherwise you might just be indifferent to. Let me look at them a bit individually in that case. I think Claude is the easier one for me to talk about, because what's missing with him to get me invested in him is pretty easy to identify. In a hypothetical scenario where there were no self-inserts, there was no avatar character at all, I think I would enjoy Claude more, because we would get to see more of his interiority. We'd have things like internal monologues, we'd potentially have flashbacks, things that Claude hides from all the other characters, avatars included, and because he hides them, the player never really gets to engage with them, and that makes it very difficult for me to engage with Claude as a character. I mentioned that in my Golden Wildfire video. We know so little about his life before he came to Fodlan, and we don't really get a strong sense of how that's affected him, even little bits. Like I'm not particularly interested in Nadir as a playable character, but I would have enjoyed having him as one in Golden Wildfire, if only so that he could have supports with Claude, and that we could actually see Claude interacting with someone from his pre-Fodlan past and see how that played out. I think that would have been very interesting. But because we don't get that, and we don't really get a sense of what Claude actually, wants, and it's hard to parse that from game to game because the scenarios are different. I mean, people have already done a lot of arguments over whether or not his character development at the end of Verdant Wind is actual character development, and it mostly depends on how you feel about Rhea. That I can take or leave. I don't really care. I don't talk much about Rhea, and it exhausts me to talk about her because people make her out to be a bigger character than she really is, especially in Three Hopes. Like, Three Hopes, she is barely even in the game until the plot needs her for something, and then she's dragged out until the plot no longer needs her, and then she's put back on the shelf, effectively. And it's mostly characters saying things about her that, if you really dig into supports and things, that wouldn't really hold up. Either she wouldn't care about them, or she'd actively be against them. Like I'm thinking of the Dew and Catherine support, where Rhea chastises Catherine for trying to force religion on non-believers. I mean, I think that's fairly interesting. But anyway, so yes, back to Claude. If we'd had more interiority and more of his history and like less of a mystery. He needs to be less of a mystery for me to connect with him. I think that's one of the reasons that Dimitri is so easy to connect with, is that he lays everything out, and it's not even just as a self-insert. Like his supports with Dedu and Felix especially are really intimate. And of course that fuels a lot of the gay subtext, but it also just gives you a much stronger sense of who he is as a character. Claude doesn't get that. Like even with Hilda, who you might expect him to open up to more because, heterosexual romance, it's just not there as much, and that's disappointing. Obviously, I would have liked if Claude had gay subtext himself, but, I can kind of take or leave that. I feel like I'm only personally annoyed by the popularity of bi Claude in fandom, like people thinking that he is bi, because people will then jump to the very untrue assertion that Dimitri is straight, usually as an attempt to tear him down. And I'm like, have you actually played this game? Have you seen it? Dimitri supports? I mean, he gets buried with a guy, right? Like, I'm not going to rehash my Dimmy-Doo video, but there's a lot going on there. So that's Claude. As for Edelgard, I'm going to make the fairly obvious statement up front that I would never have been as interested in her as I am in Dimitri on the basis of queer content, for the simple reason that I have no personal connection to lesbian content in the same way that I do to gay male content. But even aside from that, Edelgard is kind of like Felix, where she's not really a character type that I'm usually all that invested in. For comparison's sake, my favorite female character from the Fodlan games is Manuela, because she's just a messy alcoholic diva, and I find her sadly relatable the older I get. And also, like Manuela, you may not know my real age, although I do welcome all flattering guesses. Anyway, Edelgard is obviously a very different character from that, and I don't have much reason for me to be as interested in anything that she does have to offer. I do think that, as I said about Claude, if we'd had a hypothetical scenario without avatars, it would have helped Edelgard as well, although for different reasons in her case. For Edelgard, it would be less the perspective that we get on her and more just that her writing would not be so centered around the avatar. I realize that would never have happened, especially because the original concept for Three Houses was stated to be like a lord fighting an avatar, so basically the Silver Snow situation. So the Edelgard and Byleth, at least antagonism, was always planned from the beginning. But that she is so scripted around being Byleth's love interest is really off-putting to me. I mean, yes, there's the obvious point that I'm gay, so I'm not going to connect with a female character wanting to be with my self-insert, or the character I'm supposed to treat as a self-insert. But also, I've talked about it in several of my other videos and a lot on my blog, just how much that weakens her as a character, because she's also drawing heavily on, the Red Emperor archetype that's Fire Emblem has had since the Kaga era. And it could have been really interesting for to have her as like a villain protagonist, just kind of on her own, doing the similar things that characters like Hardin and Arvis and Valhart and so forth do, but doing them from a player perspective and kind of, villains or heroes in their own mind. It would have been interesting to see her from that angle, and especially with Hubert there. Hubert is one of my favorite characters, and I mean, I enjoy his hammy villainy, but I would have liked the counterpoint of Edelgard, feeling more justified in what she does and not just, twirling a non-existent mustache the whole time. And that was kind of what I liked about Edelgard in the beginning of Scarlet Blaze, and why I generally prefer Scarlet Blaze's story to Crimson Flower, is that, up until it kind of just drops the ball at the very end, when, Edelgard doesn't even get to kill either of her enemies. They just take each other out and then, high five. it was doing generally better than Scarlet Blaze in most better than Crimson Flower in most respects. And so I did like that, and that was a genuine improvement for Edelgard's character, her, having more agency and taking more of an active role in the story and emphasizing that she was the one making these decisions, that it wasn't just, Hubert doing all the work for her behind the scenes, or the Agarthans, making her do anything evil. It's like, just, you're capturing civilians and torturing them and turning them into monsters. Own that shit. That would have been so much more fun and entertaining, and I cannot stand that I'm probably going to get the most comments about this and complaining about me calling her a villain and telling her to, own creating demonic beast, and, I would have enjoyed that. Stop trying to, kill my buzz here. Thank God for Hubert. I just love how wonderfully, unapologetically evil Hubert is. He is my breath of evil fresh air. That kind of makes sense, or it made more sense in my head. Anyway, so yes, an Edelgard who did not have to pivot her, entirely around a self-insert, particularly in a romantic sense, would have been a vast improvement. And an Edelgard who doesn't feel compromised, or who didn't feel compromised by the need to be marketable, to not just be a Red Emperor, but to be that waifu. And people have noted that, her design got a lot more a lot softer in the transition from Three Houses to Three Hopes, that, she lost the severe Emperor look, and now she's wearing a short skirt and a less severe hairstyle. And while I'm not a very good judge of, what makes female characters attractive to a primarily male audience, I can kind of see that. And yes, Dimitri got that too. Dimitri definitely got a softer look from Three Houses post-time skip to Three Hopes, but I think it just hits differently with male characters for a variety of reasons. It's not a one-to-one comparison there. And I think so Scarlet Blaze and Three Hopes Edelgard was a step in the right direction, but it still feels like she's compromised at the end. Even what I've heard about how Byleth affects the ending of Scarlet Blaze, and it's she cannot get away from this one self-insert, can she? Or her second support with Hubert, where they still make sure to tell you that she's got some kind of strange connection to Byleth. And it's why do you keep having, this is clearly for people who formed some sort of parasocial attachment to Edelgard back in Three Houses. They're having to assure those players that, Edelgard still loves you. And it's just so transparent and so dumb. And I would like her so much more if that wasn't there. But I know it never will be, because she has to be marketable. She is, a headlining female character. And it just speaks to how intelligence systems and really a lot of media just kind of treats female characters very differently from male ones in terms of marketing and, making sure that they remain sympathetic or, stuff like that. So that's essentially what it would take for me to like Edelgard more, is just no Byleth. And I think there does seem to be a common thread here. I do think that the writing of Three Houses / Hopes would be just overall improved if we didn't have all this player pandering. I know some people like it, and if you do, more power to you, but it makes so many characters and so many situations in these games a lot weaker, because they have to revolve around, making the player feel special. But that's enough of me rambling about a topic that I've already rambled about in several other videos at this point. I want to turn these questions back around to you guys. If you have a house leader or a house that you particularly favor over the others, what would it take for you to like the others as much as you like that one, or at least to like the other two more? Or on the flip side, if there's one that you particularly dislike, what would it take for you to like them as much as you like the other two, or at least to feel neutral about them? I would really like to read your comments. And of course, if you like the video, feel free to give it a like. If you haven't subscribed to me yet, I'd really appreciate it if you did so. I'm very close to 250 subscribers, so I would love to hit that milestone, as minor as it may be in the grand scheme of things. And once again, thank all of you for, listening and, enjoying my content, engaging with it. And I will talk to you guys a while later. Life is happening for me currently, so I would not expect any major scripted videos coming out with me for the next month or so. But I definitely have plans for that, including the queer subtext video, maybe some other smaller things in between. But yes, anyway, like, subscribe, comment, tell me your thoughts. Au revoir.